They told me you forget most jobs. It's the big ones. The murders, the drug busts, the car crashes where you're ankle deep in glass and fuel. That stay with you. That's not true. I've been on plenty of big jobs and gone home after, cooked dinner, watched the footy, slept fine. It's the ones you can't explain that dig in and stay with you because your brain keeps circling back, trying to fit the pieces together into something that makes sense. And when it can't, it just keeps chewing. This was back in 2013, stationed out near Charleville. It's the kind of place where you can drive for hours without seeing another car. The air out there doesn't move much in summer. It just hangs over you, dry and heavy, like a blanket you can't kick off. We got the call just after 8 a.m. from a bloke named Harry Scott. Harry ran the nearest cattle station to a man named Trevor Milburn, nearest being about 40 kilometres away. He said Trevor hadn't been seen in a few days. Harry only noticed because Trevor usually came into town every Thursday for supplies, and he'd missed 2 weeks in a row. Harry drove over to check and found Trevor's place empty. I drove out with Constable Hargreaves. The drive took over 2 hours, and most of it was just straight dirt track. We saw a single kangaroo, a few wedge-tailed eagles circling something in the distance, and not much else. Out that way, you learn to measure distance in thermos coffees. Trevor's property was small for the area, maybe 40 hectares, but it still felt like it went on forever. When we pulled up, his ute was parked out front, covered in a fine layer of red dust. The place was silent except for the low, constant hum of flies. Inside, the house looked lived in, but paused. The kettle still had water in it. There was half a sandwich on the kitchen counter starting to curl at the edges. A cup of tea sat cold on the table. His bed was made. No signs of a struggle. Nothing knocked over. No footprints on the veranda apart from his. We did a sweep of the sheds, the paddocks, even the rainwater tank in case he'd gone in to clean it. Nothing. We called it in, and HQ sent a couple more units and a dog out. The dogs caught his scent around the back of the house and followed it past the fence line into the scrub. I remember walking behind them, boots sinking into the soft red dirt. About 2 kilometres out, we found the footprints, barefoot, the toes dug in hard like he was throwing his weight forward every step. Not like someone walking, more like someone starting a sprint over and over again. It was midday by then, heat shimmering off the ground. The dogs were getting restless, the air was bone dry, and the only sounds were cicadas. We followed those prints for another 3 kilometres before they just stopped. Not faded, stopped. The last one was deep, toes curled in like he'd pushed off with all his strength, and then there was nothing but unbroken dirt. We stood there a long time trying to work out what we were missing. No branches overhead he could have climbed, no signs of a vehicle, no rocks to hop onto. Just a flat, empty expanse. We searched for 2 full days, calling in SES volunteers and even a chopper. Found no body, no clothes, no blood. The search pattern went out nearly 30 kilometres in every direction. On the 3rd morning, we were packing up when a call came in from a station 70 kilometres east. A stockman named Alec said an old man had wandered onto his property early that morning. Said he looked confused, dehydrated, barefoot. Claimed his name was Trevor Milburn. Alex said he'd been up checking a bore pump when he looked across the paddock and saw nothing. And then a moment later the man was just there. No one walking up, no dust cloud, just standing in the open like he'd been dropped from the sky. We drove straight there. Trevor was sitting in the shade, sipping water, his eyes a bit glazed over, but otherwise calm. His skin was sunburned, but not as bad as you'd expect after 3 days in the outback without shelter. The strange part, his feet were clean. No cuts, no blisters. You walk barefoot on that country for even an hour, you'll shred your soles. I asked him what happened. He looked at me for a long time like he was deciding whether to tell the truth, then said, "It was dark, and then I was somewhere else." That's all he'd give me. wouldn't say where somewhere else was, or how he'd travelled 70 kilometres without leaving tracks. His watch was still ticking, but 3 days behind. We took him to hospital for checks. The doctor said he was mildly dehydrated, but otherwise fine. No signs of heat stroke, no neurological damage, nothing. Within a week, Trevor had sold the property. I heard he moved to Brisbane and never came back west. Every so often, when I'm out in the bush and the flies go quiet, I think about those footprints ending in the dirt and the way Trevor just appeared, like something had reached down, taken him out. Most people think the creepiest jobs we get are the murders, or the ones with a lot of blood. They're not. You can process blood. You can write a report, take photos, book an arrest. There's a start, a middle, an end. You can hand it off to the detectives, close the file, and sleep. The ones that keep you awake are the jobs that never land anywhere. The ones where you run through every possible explanation and still can't file it under humanly possible. I've been in highway patrol for 7 years. I know the pattern of the work. You sit through hours of boredom, the kind that makes your mind wander, and then you get jolted into a few minutes of adrenaline. Most of the time it's the same faces, drunk drivers weaving across lanes, overconfident P-platers, blokes with expired regos who get angry when you point it out. That night didn't set off any alarms. It was a Wednesday in late August, just before 2 a.m. My partner, Senior Constable Harris, and I were parked on the Monash outbound, just past Toorak Road. We'd been running speed checks for about an hour, chatting about nothing in particular. It's a strange part of the shift. The city's still alive, but quieter, like someone's turned the volume down. The street lights were casting their orange pools across mostly empty lanes. Every now and then a cab or a rideshare would cruise past, tyres hissing on the asphalt. The air inside the car was warm from the heater. Harris had a stale meat pie from the servo sitting on the dash. Then the silver Holden Commodore came into view, far right lane, sitting at 97 in an 80 zone. Not screamingly fast, but enough. I flicked on the lights and tapped the siren twice. The car slowed immediately, indicated and moved left with surgical precision, lane by lane, until it was on the shoulder. The whole manoeuvre looked like it was lifted from a driver's ed video. When I approached the driver's side, the window was already down. The man inside looked mid to late 40s, clean shaven, short dark hair with a bit of grey at the temples, neat white shirt, navy tie. He had the kind of calm you see in people used to business meetings and polite conversation. "Evening, sir," I said. "Evening, officer," he replied. His voice was smooth, even. I explained the speed. He nodded once. "Sorry about that. Late meeting. I'm heading home. Lost track of the limit." There was no trace of alcohol, no shifting eyes, no fidgeting. He had both hands on the wheel, elbows relaxed, posture straight. "License, please," I said. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed it over without hesitation. Grant Wallace, South Bank address. The card was warm, like it had been in his pocket for hours. I went back to the patrol car. Harris was already typing his details into the system. The green loading circle spun for a moment, then his face tightened. "Something's wrong," he said. On the screen, in neat black text, "Deceased." The record said Wallace had died in a single vehicle accident on the Calder Freeway at 9:47 p.m. that same night, 4 hours earlier. The incident report had already been uploaded. Crash location, witness statements, coroner transfer. Same date of birth, same address, same license number. I thought maybe there'd been a clerical error. I told Harris to quietly call comms for confirmation while I went back to the Holden. Only, it wasn't there. The shoulder was bare, not rolled forward 10 metres bare. Gone bare, no taillights fading into the distance. No sound of tyres or an engine. Just an empty stretch of asphalt under the harsh street lights. I walked 50 metres up the shoulder, scanning the breakdown lane and peering over the guardrail into the scrub. Nothing. Walked 50 metres back. Still nothing. Back in the patrol car, Harris was pale. He'd spoken to the crash investigation unit. They had photos. Silver Commodore, same Rego. Wallace's body had been removed to the coroner just before midnight. The car was a write-off. We drove the stretch of freeway twice, then checked the on-ramps and exits. The traffic camera feed for our section showed the Commodore pulling over when I hit the lights. And then, between one frame and the next, it just wasn't there. No cut to black, no glitch. Just gone. We filed the stop as unable to locate. It looked ridiculous in writing, but what else could we put? Vehicle ceased to exist? For the rest of that week, the whole thing needled at me. So on my day off, I went into the incident archive and pulled the crash file. The photos were as bad as you'd expect. The Commodore's front end was folded in on itself, engine block pushed halfway into the cabin. The roof had caved, the windscreen spiderwebbed into white cracks. The number plate matched exactly. And in the driver's seat was the man I'd spoken to. Same white shirt and navy tie, same neat haircut. His head was tilted slightly, eyes half closed. His face looked strangely peaceful, like someone sleeping. In one close-up, I saw his watch. Stainless steel. They say the bush is quiet, but that's not true. Spend enough nights out there and you realise it's never silent. There's always something moving, whistling, ticking. What gets you isn't the noise, it's when it stops. I was stationed out in the Gascoyne region in 2016. If you don't know it, picture dry riverbeds and red dirt that gets into everything. Your boots, your teeth, the folds of your uniform. Flat horizons in every direction, the sun hitting the earth so hard in summer it feels like the sky is pressing down on you. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and if a stranger drives through, you hear about it before they've reached the next roadhouse. One night, just after 10 p.m, I got a call from dispatch. A woman named Merrill lived on a property about 3 kilometres from her nearest neighbour, said she could hear shouting coming from the next house over. It had been going on for a while. She couldn't make out the words, but she said it didn't sound like a normal argument. Like they're angry at someone who isn't there, she said. The next house over was still 40 kilometres from town. It belonged to a couple named Alan and Rosie Clark. I'd met Alan a few times. Big bloke, quiet, worked on the stations further inland. Never had so much as a speeding fine. Rosie kept to herself even more. I grabbed the keys to the Land Cruiser and headed out. The drive took me down a narrow dirt track with nothing but the occasional fence post to break the dark. My headlights caught the moths and grasshoppers that always seemed to throw themselves at the windscreen out here. The further out I got, the more the night pressed in. No breeze, no insects calling, just the hum of the tyres on the dirt. When I reached the Clark's property, the front gate was wide open. That was odd in itself. Folks out here kept them shut to keep stock in and strays out. The house sat low against the scrub, tin roof dull under the starlight. There were no lights on inside. I parked in front and knocked on the door. Nothing. No footsteps. No shuffling. I called out both their names. Still nothing. I walked around the house, checking the windows with my torch. Inside I saw a tidy kitchen, a jacket over the back of a chair, a plate and cup drying on the rack. The bedroom blinds were drawn. I radioed in, said I'd do a perimeter sweep. That's when I noticed the tracks. 2 sets of boot prints in the dirt, heading away from the house toward the back paddock. One set was deeper, heavier. Could have been Alan carrying something, or someone. I followed them, my torch beam catching dust motes and the odd spider thread between the bushes. After about 200 metres I started hearing it. A faint rhythmic thump through the ground. Not footsteps, not machinery. more like a single slow heartbeat you could feel in your boots. I told myself it was a water pump somewhere in the distance. The prints led me to a stand of mulga trees. That's where they stopped, not faded out. Stopped, like someone had lifted the wearers straight off the earth. I swung my torch around. In the far distance between the trunks, I caught sight of something pale. It was low to the ground and moving away slowly, just enough to vanish when I stepped forward. Then my radio crackled. Not with static, but with a voice. Low, hoarse, male. One word. Not here. The line hissed back into static. I stood frozen, every muscle in my shoulders tight. When I looked back toward the pale shape, it was gone. I headed for the house again. That's when I saw it. Every window I'd passed earlier, the ones that had been closed, was now wide open. The curtain shifted slightly, though the night air was dead still. Inside, the kitchen light was on. On the table was a pot of tea, steam curling from the spout. 2 cups sat beside it. One was half full and still warm. I called out again, louder this time. My own voice felt too loud in the stillness. I checked every room. No sign of anyone. No overturned chairs. No broken plates. Just a perfectly normal house that had clearly been lived in minutes before. The only odd thing was in the bedroom. A clock on the wall, ticking backwards. I left after securing the house. Wrote it up as unfounded disturbance, because what else can you put? House empty except for backwards clock and disembodied voice. 2 days later I drove past again. The front gate was chained shut. Merrill told me the Clarks had moved east overnight. She hadn't seen them leave. Just woke up and the house was empty. That's not the part that stays with me though. The part that sticks is this. I know my boot prints were in the dirt under those mulgas on the way in. Clear as day. But when I turned to leave that night, they weren't there. And sometimes when I think about it, I wonder if they ever were.